you trust your memories. When you remember your childhood home, you believe that home existed. When you remember what you had for breakfast last Tuesday, you trust that breakfast happened. This trust is not optional. It is the foundation of your sanity. Without it, you would wake up every morning as a stranger in a world you cannot verify. You also trust that the physical world follows rules. Doors don't lead to countries that don't exist. People don't vanish from locked rooms. Villages don't disappear overnight with dinner still cooking on the stove. These rules allow you to navigate reality without constantly checking if the floor is about to become the ceiling. We call this shared reality, the agreement that what we see matches what is actually there. Science supports this agreement. It gives us ways to understand strange things. Meteors explain lights in the sky. Memory problems explain forgotten events. Random chance explains odd patterns. There is always an explanation, even if we haven't found it yet. This is the comfortable lie we tell ourselves. Not that science has all the answers, but that science can, in principle, answer everything. But there is a category of events that scientists don't just struggle to explain. They refuse to talk about them at all. These are the reality glitches, events so completely incompatible with our understanding of physics, memory, and cause and effect that admitting they happened would require rebuilding the entire framework from scratch. It is not that these events are rare. Many have been documented, investigated, and verified by credible witnesses, authorities, and institutions. The problem is that they are impossible. And when something impossible happens, science has two choices. It can expand to include the impossible, or it can pretend the impossible didn't happen. Throughout history, science almost always chooses the second option. Not because scientists are cowards, but because the alternative is too dangerous. If you admit that entire populations can share identical false memories with no brain-based explanation, you have to question the reliability of all human testimony, including the testimony that built scientific knowledge in the first place. If you admit that a man with valid papers can arrive from a country that doesn't exist, you have to question the nature of space, identity, and recorded history. The glitches we are about to explore are not mysteries in the traditional sense. A mystery is something we don't understand yet, like how birds navigate or why we dream. A mystery invites questions. A glitch, on the other hand, suggests something is broken. It implies that the code running reality has bugs, errors in the program that occasionally produce results that violate the rules. And if reality has glitches, if the simulation can crash, then everything you trust about the stability of existence is in question. This isn't paranoia. This isn't conspiracy theory rambling. These are documented events that have witnesses, sometimes thousands of them. Events that were investigated by police, military, scientists, and journalists. Events that left physical evidence, radio recordings, photographs, and official reports. And yet, when you look for the explanations, when you ask the experts what happened, you find silence. Not ignorance, not ongoing investigation. Silence. The kind of silence that feels like a door being closed in your face. So ask yourself, do you want to know what's on the other side of that door? Because once you see reality as a glitched program instead of a solid foundation, you can never go back to feeling truly secure. The world will look the same tomorrow. The sun will rise. Your coffee will taste normal. But underneath, in the back of your mind, you will carry the knowledge that the world has hiccuped before, and it can hiccup again. We are going to move through 10 glitches in a specific order. We start with glitches in memory, the corruption of the database. Then we move to glitches in physical space, objects and people appearing where they shouldn't. Then we examine glitches in communication, signals from nowhere, and messages that make no sense. Then we look at glitches in time itself, the possibility that history is not what we think. And finally, we confront the most disturbing category, glitches in the rendering of reality, moments when the screen flickers and we see the code underneath. This isn't just a list of weird stories. This is a descent into a specific kind of terror. The terror of realizing that the world is not stable, that memory is not reliable, that history might be edited, that you might be living in a construct that occasionally malfunctions. By the end of this, the solid ground beneath your feet will feel a little less solid, the past will feel a little less certain, and the present moment will feel like it could glitch out at any second. Let's begin with the most immediate threat to your sense of reality: your memories. The first glitch we need to examine is the Mandela effect. You have probably heard of it. You might have even experienced it. And if you have, you probably dismissed it as a simple mistake, a quirk of human memory. But when you look at the data, when you see the scale and the specificity of the shared false memories, dismissal becomes much harder. The Mandela effect is named after Nelson Mandela, the South African leader who fought against apartheid. He died in 2013. This is a fact. There are news reports, a funeral, global mourning. But here is the glitch. Thousands of people, maybe millions, remember him dying in prison in the 1980s. Not sort of remember, not vaguely recall. They remember watching the funeral on television. They remember the news coverage. They remember discussing it in school. They remember the sadness, the riots, the international reaction. These are not vague impressions. These are detailed, specific emotional memories. Now, one person, misremembering would be normal. Memory is fallible. We mix up dates. We confuse events. But this is not one person. This is a statistically significant portion of the population sharing an identical false memory down to specific details. They remember the same footage, the same news anchor, the same year. How? Standard neuroscience cannot explain this. When you form a memory, your brain encodes it based on your unique experience. Even if two people witness the same event, their memories will differ because their attention, their emotions, their prior knowledge, all shape how the memory is stored. So if 1,000 people misremember something, their false memories should be wildly different. Some would say Mandela died in 1983, others in 1987. Some would remember a funeral, others a riot, others a quiet announcement, but they don't. They remember the same thing. This is not just about Mandela. The effect has been documented across dozens of other examples. The Berenstain Bears, a children's book series. Millions of people remember it being spelled Berenstain with an E. They are wrong. It has always been Berenstain with an A. But go online and you will find entire communities of people who remember learning to read with Berenstain Bears. They remember the cursive E on the cover. They remember teachers pronouncing it Berenstein. They are not lying. They are not confused. They are remembering something that, according to every physical copy of the book, never existed. Or the Monopoly Man. Close your eyes and picture him, the little character from the board game. Does he have a monocle? A single eyepiece over one eye? Most people say yes. They remember the monocle clearly. They can picture it. But if you check the actual game, he has never had a monocle. Not in any edition, not in any country, not at any point in the 100-year history of the game. And yet, the memory persists. Or the movie line from Star Wars. Darth Vader reveals he is Luke's father. What does he say? Most people answer, "Luke, I am your father." That is the line everyone quotes. That is the line on t-shirts and memes. But if you watch the actual scene, he never says Luke's name. He says, "No, I am your father." You can verify this right now. Pull up the clip. Listen. The collective memory is wrong. Now, skeptics will say, this is just how memory works. Memory is reconstructive. We fill in gaps. We are influenced by parody and repetition. If a comedian misquotes a line and it becomes popular, that false version can overwrite the original in our minds. This is a reasonable explanation for one or two examples, but the Mandela effect is not one or two examples, it is dozens, and the pattern is too consistent. The errors are too specific, and the emotional certainty of the people experiencing it is too strong. Think about what it would require for these explanations to work. For the Berenstain Bears example, you would need an alternate version of the books to have existed, and been distributed widely enough that millions of children across different countries, different decades, different schools, all saw the same misspelling. Then, somehow, every single copy of that misspelled version would need to vanish without a trace. Not one copy in a thrift store, not one photograph, not one library record. Gone, completely, replaced by the A version. Does that sound more likely than a glitch in reality? Or consider the psychology angle. Let's say these are all just false memories created by suggestion. That means the human brain is so unreliable that you can be absolutely certain of a memory, emotionally connected to it, able to describe it in detail, and still be completely wrong. Not sort of wrong, not mixing up minor details, completely inventing entire experiences that never happened. If that is true, then how can you trust any of your memories? How do you know your childhood actually happened the way you remember? How do you know last Tuesday was real? This is why scientists are silent on the Mandela effect. Not because it is silly, but because it is dangerous. If they admit that collective false memories are real and unexplained, they undermine the foundation of historical testimony. Every courtroom relies on witness memory. Every history book is built on recorded accounts. Every scientific experiment depends on the researcher accurately remembering what they did. If memory can be collectively rewritten with no clear mechanism, then all of that is in question. But the silence makes it worse. Because the people experiencing these effects know something is wrong. They know what they remember. And when every official source tells them they are mistaken, when every book, every recording, every physical object contradicts their memory, they are left with two choices. Accept that their brain is completely unreliable, or accept that reality itself has changed. Most people choose the first option because it is less frightening, but a growing number are choosing the second. And they are starting to ask dangerous questions. If reality can change, what changed it? If our memories are from a different version of history, what happened to that version? Did it ever exist? Are we shifting between timelines? Is someone editing the past? And if so, why? These questions lead to the second glitch in our spiral. Because if the Mandela effect suggests that reality can be edited, the CERN timeline shift theory suggests we know who might be doing the editing. CERN is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. It operates the Large Hadron Collider, the most powerful particle accelerator ever built. It is a 17-mile ring buried under the border between France and Switzerland, where protons are smashed together at nearly the speed of light. The official purpose is to study the fundamental building blocks of matter. In 2012, they discovered the Higgs boson, confirming a major piece of the standard model of physics. This is mainstream science. This is Nobel Prize-winning work. But in September 2015, CERN restarted the collider after a 2-year shutdown for upgrades. They increased the power, they increased the collision energy, and within weeks, something strange started happening. Reports of Mandela effects exploded, not gradually, not in proportion to internet growth. Suddenly, exponentially, people who had never heard of the phenomenon started independently reporting the same glitches, same misspellings, same misremembered events, same impossible certainties. Before September 2015, the Mandela effect was a niche idea discussed on small forums. After September 2015, it became a global phenomenon. Thousands of new examples emerged. Entire websites were created to catalog them. Facebook groups with hundreds of thousands of members formed overnight. The pattern was too sharp to ignore. Something changed when CERN turned the machine back on. Now, correlation is not causation. Just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean one caused the other. But when you look at the theory behind the collider, the correlation becomes more unsettling. The Large Hadron Collider doesn't just smash particles. It creates conditions that haven't existed since the Big Bang. It generates energies so extreme that space and time behave differently. Theoretical physicists openly discuss the possibility that the collider could create microscopic black holes, strange matter, or even open portals to other dimensions. These are not fringe ideas. These are peer-reviewed papers published in respected journals. Some of these theories involve the multiverse, the idea that every quantum decision creates a split, a branching of reality into parallel timelines. In one timeline, you drink coffee this morning. In another, you drink tea. Both timelines are real. Both versions of you exist. They just can't interact. But what if something could make them interact? What if a machine generating Big Bang level energies could create quantum effects on a macro scale? What if it could blur the boundaries between timelines? If that happened, if two timelines began to merge or overlap, what would it feel like? You wouldn't notice the gradual shift. Your memories would update in real time. You wouldn't remember the coffee if you are in the tea timeline. But what if the merge wasn't clean? What if some memories leaked through? You would remember drinking coffee even though in this timeline you drank tea. You would have two sets of memories for the same morning. One matches the physical evidence around you, one doesn't. That is the Mandela effect. So in September 2015, when CERN fired up the collider at record energy levels, did they punch a hole between timelines? Did we merge with an alternate version of reality where the Berenstain Bears were spelled differently, where Mandela died in prison, where the Monopoly Man had a monocle? Is this timeline a blended version, a corrupted file where two histories are trying to occupy the same space? The official response from CERN has been to ignore the theory completely. They do not address it. They do not investigate it. They do not even acknowledge the correlation. When asked directly, their spokespeople say the collider has no effect on macroscopic reality and redirect to their published research. But the silence is telling. If the theory is nonsense, why not debunk it? Why not publish a paper explaining why it is impossible? Why not engage? One possible answer is that they cannot debunk it without admitting certain things. To prove the collider can't affect timelines, you first have to prove timelines exist. And mainstream physics is not ready to do that. The multiverse is still theoretical. Many worlds' interpretation of quantum mechanics is one option among several. If CERN says, we can't shift timelines because timelines don't exist, they are taking a philosophical stance that half of their own theoretical physicists would disagree with. Another possible answer is that they are unsure. Maybe they don't know what effects are possible at these energies. The Higgs field, the thing they are studying, is responsible for giving particles mass. It is woven into the fabric of space-time. If you disturb it at a fundamental level, who knows what could happen? Maybe they are running calculations, running models, trying to figure out if there is any mechanism by which the collider could influence collective human memory or timelines or quantum coherence on a brain-scale level. And maybe those calculations are showing something they are not ready to share. Or maybe, and this is the darkest possibility, they know. Maybe internal teams have detected anomalies. Maybe the data shows correlations they can't explain. Maybe they are seeing the glitches in their own records, discrepancies in logs, equipment behaving in ways that doesn't match the blueprints. And maybe they have decided that saying nothing is safer than starting a global panic. Because if CERN came out tomorrow and said, we think we might have accidentally merged our timeline with another, what would happen? Financial markets would collapse. Religious institutions would fracture. Legal systems would fail. How do you prosecute someone for a crime if history is fluid? How do you verify identity if records can change? How do you maintain social order if people can't agree on basic facts about the past? The silence, the refusal to investigate, might be a calculated decision to protect stability, but it leaves those of us experiencing the glitches in a nightmare. We know something is wrong. We have the evidence, our own memories, but we are being told to ignore that evidence. We are being told we are mistaken. We are being gaslit by reality itself. And this brings us to the third glitch. Because if the Mandela effect is a corruption of memory, and the CERN theory is a possible cause, then the man from Torrid is proof that the corruption is not limited to the past. It can affect the present. It can affect physical space. It can make people appear from places that do not exist. Let's go back to July 1954. Tokyo International Airport. A man arrives on a flight from Europe. He approaches customs. He hands over his passport. The customs officer looks at it, frowns, and calls over a supervisor. The passport appears legitimate. It has stamps, visas, official seals, but the country of origin is wrong. The passport says he is from Taured. There is no country called Taured. The officer points this out. The man becomes confused, then agitated. He insists he is from Taured. He pulls out a map and points to the location. It is where the Principality of Andorra should be, a small nation between France and Spain. But on his map, it says Taured. He says his country has existed for 1,000 years. He has business documents from a Taured-based company. He has currency from Taured. He has a driver's license from Taured. He has a hotel reservation in Tokyo and a return ticket to Taured. The Japanese officials detain him. This is not a language barrier. The man speaks multiple languages fluently. This is not a forged document. The passport is genuine, printed on the correct paper with the correct security features. It is just from the wrong country. They take him to a hotel room in the airport while they investigate. They confiscate his documents. They post guards outside his room. The door is locked. The windows don't open. It is a contained situation. The next morning, they go to question him. The room is empty. The door is still locked from the outside. The guards swear no one entered or left. The window is still sealed. The man is gone. Not just gone, vanished. And so have his documents. The passport, the business papers, the currency, all of it was locked in a secured office in the airport. That morning, the folder is empty. No sign of tampering, no explanation. Now this story has been told and retold so many times that the details have become blurry. Skeptics say it is an urban legend, that there is no official record of the incident, but multiple sources from the 1950s and 60s reference it. A Swiss newspaper ran a story. A French magazine mentioned it. Japanese researchers have found references in old immigration logs, though the details are vague and the records incomplete. The story is not airtight, but it is not baseless either. Let's assume for a moment the core event is true. A man with a passport from a non-existent country appeared, was detained, and vanished along with his papers. What does that mean? The easy explanation is fraud. He had a fake passport and somehow escaped and stole the documents. But that doesn't address the specifics. If you are going to forge a passport, why invent a country? Why not use a real nation? Fake identity, real location. That is how forgery works. Creating an entire fictional country makes no sense from a practical standpoint. Unless he wasn't, from this reality. Unless he slid from a parallel timeline where Taured exists, instead of Andorra. In his world, Taured is real. It has existed for 1,000 years. It has embassies, trade agreements, passports. He got on a plane in his version of Europe and got off in our version of Japan. And now he is stuck in a world where his home doesn't exist, where his documents are gibberish, where every map is wrong. How would you react in that situation? You would be confused, then angry, then terrified. You would insist that reality is broken. You would show them your proof. And when that proof didn't work, when everyone looked at you like you were insane, you would start to doubt yourself. Maybe he realized what happened. Maybe in that hotel room, alone, he understood that he had crossed over. And maybe he found a way to cross back. Or maybe the timeline self-corrected, ejecting the anomaly, deleting him and his impossible papers to clean up the glitch. This is not just about one man. There are other reports, less famous but similar. People appearing in airports, hospitals, police stations with documents from places that don't exist. A woman in the 1960s who claimed to be from a country called Lisania. A man in Spain who had an ID card from Tuburan. Each time the authorities detain them, each time they vanish, the pattern is consistent. The glitch tries to insert something from another timeline, and our timeline rejects it. But sometimes the glitch is bigger. Sometimes it is not just one person. Sometimes an entire village disappears. November 1930, Anjikuni Lake, northern Canada. A vast remote area inhabited by a small Inuit community. They have lived there for generations, fishing, hunting, surviving in one of the harshest climates on Earth. They are isolated but stable. Then, one day, they are gone. All of them. Overnight. A fur trapper named Joe LaBelle arrives at the village as part of his regular route. He has been there before. He knows the people. He expects to trade, share news, rest. But as he approaches, something feels wrong. The village is silent. No smoke from the fires, no dogs barking, no children playing. He walks into the camp and finds it abandoned, but not ransacked, not destroyed, abandoned mid-activity. There is food still cooking over fires, now cold but uneaten. Rifles are stacked by the doorways. In that environment, you do not leave your rifle behind. It is your survival tool, your protection, but they are still there. The sled dogs are still tied to their posts. They are dead, starved. If the people left willingly, they would have untied the dogs or taken them, but the dogs were left to starve, still leashed, unable to hunt or escape. LaBelle searches further. The kayaks are still on the shore. The graves in the small cemetery have been disturbed, not dug up from above, opened from below. The grave markers are pushed aside from the inside, as if something crawled out. There are no bodies, no signs of struggle, no blood, no tracks leading away. Just an empty village and a sense of wrongness so thick, LaBelle runs back to civilization to report it. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigate. They confirm LaBelle's account. They find the cold food, the abandoned rifles, the dead dogs. They estimate that between 25 and 30 people vanished. They search the surrounding wilderness for weeks. No footprints, no bodies, no clues. The official report states that the village was found abandoned and the cause is unknown. Then the case is quietly filed away. Now there are natural explanations. Starvation can drive people to desperation. Maybe they left to find food and died in the wilderness, but they left the food behind. They left the rifles. They left the tools necessary for hunting. And why open the graves? Why exhume your ancestors if you are fleeing starvation? Disease is another theory. A sudden plague could kill everyone quickly. But then there would be bodies. If they died elsewhere, there would be tracks leading away. If they buried their own dead, there would be fresh graves. There is none of that. Just absence. Some researchers suggest a military incident. Maybe the area was used for testing, chemical weapons or something worse, and the government relocated the people and covered it up. But again, there are no records, no compensation to the families, no military logs showing activity in that region at that time. And why open the graves? What would the military gain from that? The explanation that fits the evidence, however disturbing, is a glitch. The village phased out. They crossed over to another timeline or another dimension, and the reality we inhabit filled in the gap. The graves opened from below because in the moment of transition, the bodies were pulled through, leaving the impression of an upward force. The dogs were left behind because they were not part of the transition trigger. Only the people went through. If this sounds insane, consider that. Indigenous communities across North America have stories of entire groups vanishing. The Roanoke Colony. 120 people disappeared in the late 1500s. The only clue was the word Croatoan carved into a tree. No bodies, no signs of struggle. The Inuit themselves have oral traditions of tribes that walked into the mist and never returned. These are not modern fabrications. These are old stories, passed down before the word glitch existed. What if certain locations are unstable? What if the fabric of reality is thinner in some places, and if you are there at the wrong moment, under the wrong conditions, you can slip through? The village at Anjikuni Lake, would have been there for generations. Why did it glitch in 1930? Was there a natural event, a solar storm, a magnetic anomaly? Or was it random, a quantum fluctuation that happened to hit at the wrong time? We will never know, because the case is closed. The file is buried. The RCMP stopped investigating decades ago, and the scientific community does not acknowledge it, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that physical space is not stable, that entire groups can be erased from reality without a trace. That is a level of existential threat that no institution is prepared to address. But the glitches are not just happening in remote villages. They are happening in the sky. October 21st, 1978. Frederick Valentich is a young pilot flying a Cessna over the Bass Strait between the Australian mainland and Tasmania. It is a clear evening. Visibility is good. He is experienced enough to handle the flight. At 7:06 p.m, he radios Melbourne Flight Service. Is there any known traffic below 5,000 feet? There isn't. The airspace is clear. A minute later, Valentich radios again. There is an aircraft. It has 4 bright lights. It is approaching me from the east. The controller confirms there is no registered traffic in the area. Valentich describes what he is seeing. The object is large. It is moving, fast. It is not on the radar. It is circling him. He says it is not an aircraft. He repeats this several times. It is not an aircraft. Then he says something chilling. The engine is running rough. It is hovering above me. It is not an aircraft. It has a green light and metallic exterior. The controller asks for clarification. Valentich tries to describe the shape. Long, metallic, 4 lights. Then there is a strange metallic scraping sound on the radio. 17 seconds of harsh rhythmic noise. Then silence. The transmission cuts off mid-sentence. Frederick Valentich is never heard from again. A massive search is launched. Ships, planes, helicopters scour the Bass Strait. No wreckage is found. No oil slick. No debris. The Cessna is a small plane. If it crashed into the ocean, pieces would float. Life vests, seat cushions, parts of the fuselage. But there is nothing. It is as if the plane was lifted out of the sky and removed from this reality entirely. The official report from the Australian government is inconclusive. They state that the reason for the disappearance could not be determined. They note the strange radio transmission. They acknowledge that Valentich reported an unidentified object. But they offer no explanation. The case is filed under Unexplained and closed. Now, the skeptics have theories. Maybe Valentich was disoriented. Maybe he flew upside down and mistook the reflection of his own lights on the water for another craft. Maybe he staged his own disappearance. But none of these explain the metallic scraping sound. None explain the complete absence of wreckage. And none explain why multiple witnesses on the ground reported seeing a green light moving erratically over the strait at the same time Valentich was describing the object. If we take Valentich at his word, he encountered something. Something large, metallic, hovering, and capable of interfering with his engine. Something that could move in ways that defied normal flight. And then, either it took him, or the encounter caused a glitch that removed him from our timeline. His last words were an attempt to describe something his mind could not fully process. It is not an aircraft, because it wasn't. It was something else, and it was close enough to interact. This is the pattern we are seeing. Glitches are not random. They cluster, they repeat, and they often involve attempts at communication or interaction. Which brings us to the next glitch in the spiral, the wow signal. August 15th, 1977. The Big Ear Radio Telescope at Ohio State University is scanning the sky as part of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI. It is a routine night. The telescope sweeps through frequencies, listening for anything unusual. Most of the time it picks up nothing but cosmic static, the random noise of a universe full of radiation. Then, at 11:16 p.m., it detects something, a signal, strong, narrowband. Exactly at 1420 MHz, the frequency of neutral hydrogen. This is Significant because intelligent civilizations would know this frequency. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. Any species that understands radio astronomy would recognize 1420 MHz as a natural landmark, a place to broadcast if you wanted to be heard. The signal lasts for 72 seconds. It is so strong, so clearly artificial in its structure, that when astronomer Jerry Ayman reviews the printout the next day, he circles it with a red pen and writes in the margin, "Wow." The exclamation is not excitement, it is shock. This is the signal they have been hoping for. This is what first contact looks like. They immediately point the telescope back at the same patch of sky. Nothing. They listen for days, weeks, months. The signal does not repeat. They check other telescopes, other observatories around the world. No one else picked it up. It was a 72-second burst from the direction of Sagittarius, and then silence. For decades, scientists have tried to explain it. Maybe it was a satellite, but satellites move, and the signal came from a fixed point in the sky. Maybe it was a comet. But comets don't emit narrow-band radio signals at the hydrogen line. Maybe it was interference, a glitch in the equipment. But the Big Ear was designed to filter out interference, and the signal passed every test for being extraterrestrial. In 2017, a new theory emerged. Maybe it was a comet that happened to be releasing hydrogen gas at exactly the right frequency. The timing would be a 1 in a billion coincidence, but technically possible. The scientific community latched onto this explanation, not because it is convincing, but because it is the least disturbing option. If the WOW signal was a comet, then we can file it away and stop asking uncomfortable questions. But the people who were there, the astronomers who saw the data, are not convinced. Jerry Ayman himself has said the signal remains unexplained. Other SETI researchers have pointed out that the comet theory doesn't account for the signal's strength or its precise frequency. It is a convenient story, but it doesn't fit the evidence. So what are we left with? A 72-second message from the direction of Sagittarius that matches exactly what we would expect from an alien civilization trying to get our attention, and it never repeated. Why? If a civilization wanted to make contact, why send one burst and then go silent? One possibility is that it was a test. They wanted to see if we were listening. We were. We heard them. And then they stopped because they got their answer. We are here. We are capable of detecting signals. Now they know. And maybe that knowledge changed their plan. Maybe the dark forest theory is true, and they realized broadcasting to us was a mistake. Or maybe the signal was not directed at us. Maybe it was a bleed-through, a momentary overlap between our reality and another. A 72-second window where the frequencies aligned, and we picked up a transmission from a parallel Earth or a parallel galaxy where someone else is also scanning the sky, also searching. And for one brief moment, the signals crossed. Or maybe it was a warning, a message not to answer, not to reveal ourselves. And we missed it because we don't know how to decode it. The data is still there, the printout still exists, but we are looking at it with the wrong tools, listening with the wrong ears. And the silence since 1977 is not because they stopped transmitting. It is because we stopped being able to hear. This brings us to the next glitch, the Voynich manuscript. Because if the WOW signal is a message we cannot decode from space, the Voynich manuscript is a message we cannot decode from time. The Voynich manuscript is a book. It is roughly 240 pages, handwritten on vellum, and illustrated with detailed drawings. It has been carbon dated to the early 1400s. It passed through the hands of collectors, scholars, and royalty for centuries. It currently resides in the Beinecke Rare Book Library at Yale, and no one can read it. The text is written in a language that does not match any known script. It is not Latin, not Arabic, not Hebrew, not Chinese, not any constructed alphabet from that period. The letters are unique. The structure is consistent. There is clear grammar, syntax, repeated patterns that suggest real language. but it does not decode. Linguists have tried every method: substitution ciphers, frequency analysis, computer algorithms. Nothing works. Modern AI has been trained on the manuscript. Machine learning models that can crack ancient codes, that can translate dead languages with minimal examples, cannot make sense of the Voynich text. It is not random. Random text would not have the statistical patterns this does. But it is also not any language we know. It is something else. The illustrations make it stranger. The book appears to be divided into sections. There is a botanical section with drawings of plants. Except the plants do not exist. They are not stylized versions of known species. They are anatomically detailed drawings of impossible flora, roots that spiral in ways no real roots grow, flowers with symmetries that don't match biological patterns, leaves that connect to stems at wrong angles. There is an astronomical section with star charts. Except the constellations are wrong. They do not match the night sky from any location on Earth at any point in history. They are not simplified or symbolic. They are precise, labeled diagrams of stars and planets in configurations that do not occur. There is a biological section with drawings of human figures in strange tubes, connected by pipes, surrounded by symbols. The anatomy is roughly correct, but the context is alien. It looks like a medical or alchemical text, but the processes being described do not correspond to any known science or pseudoscience from that era. For 600 years, this book has existed. For 600 years, the smartest minds have tried to read it, and for 600 years, it has resisted. The most generous explanation is that it is an elaborate hoax created by a talented artist to fool collectors. But why? Hoaxes are meant to be revealed eventually. The creator would want credit. And the level of detail, the internal consistency, the sheer effort required to invent an entire language with working grammar seems excessive for a prank. Another theory is that it is an encrypted document, a coded book from a secret society or a spy network. But encryption from that period was simple. We have cracked medieval codes that were considered unbreakable, and the Voynich manuscript is older than most cryptographic systems we know. If it is a code, it is using a method so advanced it predates modern encryption by centuries. Or it is not from this timeline. It is a book that slipped through from a parallel world where the plants, the stars, the language are different. In that world, the Voynich manuscript is a common herbal guide or an astronomy textbook. But here, in our timeline, it is gibberish, a glitch object, a file from another system that our reality cannot open. If that is true, then the Voynich manuscript is not a mystery to be solved. It is a proof that the timeline is not stable, that objects can cross over, that reality is porous. And if a book can cross, what else can? What else has crossed that we haven't noticed because it blends in better? This leads us to one of the most disturbing glitches in our spiral, the phantom time hypothesis. Because if objects can cross timelines, maybe entire centuries can be inserted or deleted. The phantom time hypothesis was proposed by German historian Heribert Illig in 1991. The claim is shocking. Illig argues that the years 614 to 911 AD, roughly 300 years, never happened. They were fabricated. Added to the calendar by a conspiracy involving the Holy Roman Emperor, the Pope, and the Byzantine Emperor. According to this theory, we are not living in the 2020s. We are living in the 1720s. 3 centuries of history are fake. This sounds absurd. How could you fake 300 years? How could every record, every artifact, every genealogy be part of a coordinated lie? But Illig did not pull this idea from nowhere. He points to specific anomalies, gaps in the archaeological record, missing layers of settlement in cities that should show continuous occupation, the sudden leap in architectural style from Roman ruins to Gothic cathedrals with no clear transition. He points to the Gregorian calendar reform of 1582. Pope Gregory XIII adjusted the calendar to correct the drift caused by the inaccuracy of the Julian calendar. But the math did not add up. The Julian calendar drifts by one day every 128 years. By 1582, it should have drifted by 13 days since the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. But Gregory only removed 10 days. Where did the other 3 days go? Illig argues they went to cover up the fact that 300 years never happened. He points to Charlemagne, the most important figure of the early medieval period. Charlemagne's reign, 768 to 814 AD, falls squarely in the phantom time. Illig argues that Charlemagne is a fictional character, invented to fill the gap. The evidence for Charlemagne's existence comes mostly from texts written by a single source, Einhard, who claims to be Charlemagne's biographer. But there are no contemporary records from other kingdoms. No Arab historians mention him, despite him supposedly fighting them. No Byzantine chronicles reference him in real time. All the mentions come later, after the conspiracy was in place. Illig also points to dendrochronology, the study of tree rings. Tree ring dating is used to verify historical timelines, but when researchers try to match tree ring sequences from the early medieval period, there are gaps. Missing rings that should correspond to the phantom centuries. The standard explanation is that those trees were not preserved, but the gaps are too consistent, too aligned with the timeline Illig is questioning. Now, mainstream historians reject this theory completely. They argue that there is too much evidence for the early medieval period. Documents, coins, buildings. But Illig counters that much of this evidence is circular. The coins are dated based on the assumption that the rulers named on them existed. The documents are authenticated using paleography, which assumes the timeline is correct. The buildings are dated using architectural styles, which are categorized based on the timeline. If the timeline itself is wrong, all of that evidence becomes unreliable. The strongest argument against the phantom time hypothesis is astronomy. Solar eclipses are predictable. We can calculate when they happened in the past. Ancient records describe eclipses, and if we run the calculations backward, they should match. If 300 years were missing, the dates would be off. And most eclipse records do match, but not all. There are discrepancies. Eclipses mentioned in texts that don't line up with the math. Mainstream science attributes this to errors in the historical records. But what if the records are right and the timeline is wrong? So is Illig correct? Probably not. The conspiracy required to fake 300 years of global history is too vast, too complex. But the fact that the theory can be argued at all, that there are anomalies in the record that align with his claims, is disturbing. It suggests that our grip on history is weaker than we think, that timelines can be questioned, that what we believe happened might be an edited version. And if the timeline can be edited, who did the editing? Illig blames medieval emperors. But what if the glitch is deeper? What if reality itself edited the timeline? What if those 300 years did happen, but in another version of the world? And when the timelines merged, the centuries were compressed, deleted, or overwritten, and we are left with the scars, the gaps, the anomalies that don't quite fit. This brings us to the next glitch, the Montauk Project. Because if history can be edited, maybe someone has the technology to do it. The Montauk Project is an alleged series of secret government experiments conducted at Camp Hero, a decommissioned military base on Long Island, New York. The claims are extraordinary. Time travel, mind control, interdimensional portals, teleportation, weather manipulation, psychological warfare, all supposedly developed and tested in underground facilities beneath the base during the 1970s and 1980s. The official story says Camp Hero was just a Cold War radar station that closed in 1969. But the unofficial story, the one told by multiple whistleblowers who should have never met, paints a very different picture. The story comes from multiple sources, primarily Preston Nichols, Al Bielek, and Duncan Cameron. These men, who claim to have worked on the project in different capacities, independently describe the same experiments, the same facility, the same timeline, and the same catastrophic ending. They came forward years apart, in different locations, with no apparent coordination. And yet, their accounts align with disturbing precision. Preston Nichols says he was an electrical engineer who worked on the technical side of the project. He describes a massive SAGE radar system, a Cold War relic designed to detect Soviet bombers. But according to Nichols, this radar was never decommissioned. Instead, it was repurposed, modified, weaponized. The radar dish, he claims, was connected to experimental equipment that could amplify and transmit psychic energy. Not metaphorical energy, actual measurable waves that could influence human consciousness. The theory, as Nichols describes it, was based on discoveries made during the Philadelphia experiment in 1943. That alleged test, involving the USS Eldridge, was supposedly an attempt to make a ship invisible to radar. But according to the Montauk whistleblowers, the experiment did far more than that. It opened a hole in space-time. It demonstrated that electromagnetic fields, when configured in specific ways, could warp the fabric of reality itself. The ship did not just disappear from radar, it disappeared from Philadelphia and reappeared in Norfolk, Virginia, hundreds of miles away, in seconds. The crew of the Eldridge, according to reports that the Navy vehemently denies, suffered horrific consequences. Some were allegedly fused into the metal hull of the ship, their bodies embedded in steel, still alive, screaming. Others went insane, their minds shattered by the experience of existing outside normal space-time. Some reportedly phased in and out of visibility for days after, their molecular structure destabilized. And some, the whistleblowers claim, were simply gone, erased from reality, with no trace they had ever existed except for records that listed them as crew members. The Navy shut down the Philadelphia experiment immediately. The technology was deemed too dangerous. The research was classified. The ship was decommissioned. The survivors were allegedly given false memories, psychological conditioning to make them forget what happened. But the research did not stop. It went underground, literally. According to the Montauk whistleblowers, the technology from Philadelphia was recovered, studied, and refined over the next 30 years. By the 1970s, a new generation of scientists and military personnel had developed equipment that could not only warp space-time, but control the warp. They could aim it. They could open portals to specific times and places. And they could do it without a massive ship. They could do it with a radar dish, a psychic amplifier, and a human subject. This is where Camp Hero comes in. The base, officially closed in 1969, was actually still operational, according to the whistleblowers. The surface buildings were abandoned to maintain the illusion, but beneath the base, accessed through hidden entrances in the bunkers and tunnels left over from World War II, a massive underground facility was constructed, multi-level, concrete and steel, shielded from detection. And in the deepest levels, the Montauk chair. The chair is central to every whistleblower account. It was not just a seat, it was an interface, a device designed to connect a human mind to the reality warping equipment. The subject would sit in the chair, and their brainwaves would be amplified, broadcast through the modified radar, and projected into space-time. Whatever the subject visualized, whatever they focused on, would begin to manifest. Preston Nichols describes the chair in technical detail. Coils wrapped around the headrest to pick up electromagnetic signals from the brain. Sensors on the armrests to monitor physiological responses. Cables running to massive computers. Room-sized machines using transistor technology, mixed with something else. Something Nichols claims was not human in origin. He describes interface protocols he did not understand. Code that seemed to predict his actions before he took them. And equipment that responded to thought faster than any computer of that era should have been capable of. But the chair needed an operator, not just anyone. It required someone with natural psychic ability, someone whose mind could generate coherent, stable thought forms. Someone, and this is where the horror deepens, who could be controlled. Enter the Montauk boys. Multiple sources, including local witnesses, social workers, and investigative journalists, have documented reports of children disappearing from the Long Island area during the 1970s and early 80s. Runaways, homeless kids, orphans, children from broken homes who would not be missed. The official records are incomplete. Cases were filed and then closed with vague explanations. Found safe, returned to family, relocated. But many families insist their children were never returned. And some children who did come back were different. Changed. They had gaps in their memory. They had nightmares they could not explain. They flinched at certain sounds, certain frequencies. Duncan Cameron claims he was one of these children. He says he was recruited, though recruited is too gentle a word. He was taken, along with dozens of others, to the underground facility. They were tested, psychological evaluations, ESP tests, remote viewing exercises. The children who showed the strongest abilities were kept. The others, Cameron claims, were either released with suppressed memories or they simply disappeared. Cameron says he was trained to use the Montauk chair. For hours at a time, sometimes days, he would sit in the chair and visualize targets. At first, the targets were simple: objects, locations. The researchers would tell him to focus on a specific building in New York City, and they would verify, through independent observation, whether that building experienced any anomalies, electrical disturbances, structural stress. And it worked. The building would have a power surge, or a window would crack. Small things. Proof of concept. Then the experiments escalated. Cameron says they began testing temporal targeting. He would visualize a date, a time, a location in the past or future, and the chair would open a tunnel. Not a metaphorical tunnel. A physical hole in space-time, visible as a swirling vortex that appeared in the center of the lab. At first, the tunnels were unstable. They would collapse within seconds, but over time, with practice, Cameron learned to hold them open. Minutes, hours, and then they started sending things through. Probes, cameras, animals, and eventually, people. Al Bielek claims he was one of the people sent through. His account is the most elaborate and the most controversial. Bielek, who says his original name was Edward Cameron and that he is Duncan's brother, claims he was a crew member on the USS Eldridge during the Philadelphia experiment. When the ship phased into hyperspace in 1943, he says he and Duncan jumped overboard to escape the chaos. But instead of landing in the water, they landed in 1983, at Montauk. According to Bielek, the portal opened by the Philadelphia experiment in 1943 created a resonance, a connection point that existed across 40 years. The Montauk researchers in 1983 detected this connection and opened their end of the tunnel at the exact same moment the Eldridge vanished. The two events, separated by 4 decades, were linked. And Bielek claims he traveled that link, stepping out of 1943 and into 1983 in the underground lab at Montauk. This is where the accounts become almost impossible to process. Bielek says the researchers at Montauk were not surprised to see him. They were expecting him. They had records, documents that described his arrival from 1943. Which means, if his story is true, the Montauk project was predestined. The researchers in 1983 were following a script written by events that had not happened yet, but had already happened from their perspective. Time was not linear. It was a loop. And the loop was created by the experiments themselves. The whistleblowers describe other experiments. Psychological warfare tests, where they would use the chair to project fear, paranoia, or rage into target populations. They describe experiments in age regression, where subjects would be physically reverted to younger versions of themselves, losing years of their lives in minutes. They describe animal hybridization projects in the lower levels, genetic experiments combining human and animal DNA to create controllable soldiers. And they describe the interdimensional experiments. Cameron says he was instructed to visualize not just other times, but other places, not places on Earth. Places that did not follow the laws of physics as we understand them. And when he did, portals opened to somewhere else, realms, dimensions, realities where the rules were different, and things came through, entities. Some appeared as lights, others as shadows. Some had form, most did not, but all of them were aware, and all of them were interested in us. Here is what makes the Montauk Project disturbing beyond the specifics of the experiments. The whistleblowers do not know each other. Preston Nichols published his first book, The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time, in 1992. Al Bielek began speaking publicly in 1990. Duncan Cameron's accounts surfaced in the mid-90s. They were not friends. They did not coordinate. They came from different backgrounds, different parts of the country. Nichols was an engineer. Bielek was a physicist. Cameron was a test subject. And yet, when you lay their accounts side by side, they describe the same facility in identical detail. They all describe the same underground layout, 5 levels deep. The first level was administrative. The second level was technical, housing the computers and monitoring equipment. The third level contained the chair and the transmission equipment. The fourth level housed the subjects, children, and adults in cells. And the fifth level, the deepest, was something else. Both Nichols and Cameron describe it the same way: inhuman. A space that felt wrong, where the geometry did not add up, where walking from one end of a hallway to the other took too long, as if the distance changed mid-stride. They all described the same supervisor, a man they referred to as Dr. John von Neumann, the famous mathematician who died in 1957. Except, according to the whistleblowers, he did not die. His death was faked. He was too valuable to the project. They describe von Neumann as the architect of the experiments, the one who understood the math, the one who could calculate the exact frequencies needed to tear holes in space-time. And they describe him as cold, clinical, unconcerned with the human cost. They all describe the same timeline. The project ramped up in the early 1970s. It reached peak activity between 1976 and 1983, and it ended catastrophically on August 12, 1983. That date appears in every account, and the reason it ended is always the same. Something went wrong with the chair. Duncan Cameron, either intentionally or because he lost control, manifested something he should not have. The descriptions of what happened vary slightly, but the core is consistent. Cameron was instructed to visualize a specific target, but instead, he visualized something from his subconscious. A monster, a creature from his nightmares. And because the chair amplified thought into reality, the creature appeared. It was not a hallucination. It was not a projection. It was physical, solid, massive. The researchers called it the beast, or the monster from the id, a reference to the 1956 film Forbidden Planet. The creature tore through the facility. It destroyed equipment. It killed personnel. The underground levels were evacuated, in chaos. And the researchers, in desperation, did the only thing they could. They shut down the equipment, all of it, simultaneously. The computers, the radar, the chair, everything. And when they did, the portals collapsed. But the collapse was not clean. It was violent, a reality quake. According to the whistleblowers, the sudden shutdown created a shockwave through space-time. The portal connecting 1943 and 1983 imploded. The tunnels to other times and other dimensions sealed, but not perfectly. Rifts remained, cracks, and the effects rippled outward, not just through space, but through time. Events that had been stable became unstable. Memories that had been solid became fluid. The timeline itself fractured. And then the government moved in. They sealed the base. They buried the equipment. They reclassified the entire project under deeper classifications. They relocated the surviving personnel and subjected them to memory suppression. And they declared Camp Hero permanently closed. In 1984, the land was transferred to the state of New York and turned into a park. If this were a coordinated hoax, you would expect discrepancies. Memory is unreliable. Liars forget details. They contradict themselves. But the Montauk accounts match too well. The consistency is either evidence of truth or evidence of a very sophisticated, very coordinated deception. And the question becomes, who benefits from the deception? The whistleblowers have not made significant money from their claims. Nichols sold some books. but not bestsellers. Bielik did some lectures, but he died in obscurity. Cameron has avoided publicity for years. They have been ridiculed, dismissed, attacked. If it is a lie, it is a lie that has cost them credibility, relationships, and peace of mind, with no clear reward. The government's response has been to deny everything. Camp Hero is now a state park. Tours are available. Families picnic on the grounds. The old radar tower is still standing, dormant, a rusted relic of the Cold War. The official history says it was a coastal defense station, part of the SAGE early warning system, and nothing more. But records from that period are incomplete. There are gaps, funding allocations that do not match the official activities. Personnel transfers that make no sense. Soldiers and scientists being assigned to a closed base. Equipment requisitions for technology that did not exist publicly at the time. Orders for massive quantities of concrete and steel delivered to a facility that was supposedly abandoned. And then there are the locals. People who lived near the base during the 70s and 80s report phenomena that align disturbingly with the whistleblower accounts. Lights in the sky, not planes or helicopters, but geometric patterns of light moving in ways that defy aerodynamics. Unexplained booms, deep bass rumbles that rattled windows and made the ground vibrate. Electronic interference that shut down radios and televisions in a radius around the base, always at night, always between midnight and 4 a.m. There are reports from parents, children disappearing for hours or days and returning with no memory of where they had been. Children waking up screaming about tunnels and chairs and men in lab coats. Children developing sudden, inexplicable phobias. One mother reported that her son, after missing for 2 days in 1979, refused to enter basements or underground parking garages. Another reported her daughter became hysterical at the sound of radar, the sweeping beep you hear in movies. These reports were filed with local police. Some were documented in newspapers. Then they stopped. Not because the phenomena stopped, but because people stopped reporting. There are reports from workers, contractors hired to deliver supplies to the base, who describe being escorted by armed guards to specific buildings and told not to ask questions. Truck drivers who delivered equipment in unmarked crates, heavy, requiring forklifts, to underground. Loading bays, they were told, did not exist on any official base map. One contractor described being paid in cash, off the books, and told that if he ever spoke about the delivery, he would be prosecuted for breaching national security. There are medical reports. Between 1975 and 1983, hospitals in the Long Island area reported a spike in cases of sudden amnesia, temporal lobe epilepsy, and dissociative disorders among children and young adults. The patients described similar symptoms: missing time, fragmented memories, nightmares involving chairs, tunnels, and doctors. Some drew pictures of underground rooms with equipment they should not have been able to describe in such technical detail. These cases were referred to specialists, then quietly closed. If the Montauk Project was real, if the government was experimenting with time manipulation and interdimensional travel, what would that mean for our timeline? If you can send objects through time, you can change history. A small change in the past creates a cascade in the present. You deliver a weapon to a different moment, and suddenly a war has a different outcome. You remove a person from a timeline, and their descendants cease to exist. You open a portal to another dimension, and you bring things into this world that do not belong here, that do not follow our physics, our biology, our logic. And if you lose control, if a test subject opens a rift you cannot close, you could fracture reality. Not just in one location, everywhere. Because space-time is not separate. It is a fabric. Pull a thread in one place, and the tension affects the entire weave. A crack opened at Montauk in 1983 would propagate. It would spread. Not through space, but through time, forward and backward, affecting events that had already happened, affecting events that had not happened yet, creating inconsistencies, anomalies, glitches. The whistleblowers claim the project was shut down in 1983 because exactly that happened. A subject, Duncan Cameron, opened a portal and something came through. something hostile, something the military could not contain. They sealed the base, buried the equipment, and classified everything at the highest levels. But you cannot bury a crack in space-time. You cannot classify a timeline fracture. The damage was done. And if that is true, then the glitches we are seeing now, the Mandela effects, the timeline shifts, the objects appearing from nowhere, the people vanishing, the shared false memories across millions of people might not be random. They might be aftershocks, ripples from a wound in reality that was inflicted in 1983 and never fully healed. We are living in a damaged timeline, a corrupted file, and every glitch is evidence of the corruption spreading. Preston Nichols died in 2018. Before he died, he gave several interviews where he expressed regret, not for speaking out, but for participating. He said the Montauk researchers believed they were advancing science, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. They believed they could control the technology, but they were wrong. He said the moment they opened the first stable portal, they lost control. Because once you punch a hole in space-time, you cannot unpunch it. You can close the portal, but the hole remains, and things can find their way through. Al Bielek spent his later years trying to warn people. He spoke at conferences, gave lectures, did interviews. He insisted that the experiments at Montauk were only the beginning. That there were other projects, other facilities, still running, still experimenting. He claimed that the technology was too valuable for the government to abandon completely. That somewhere, in a classified bunker, researchers are still using chairs and amplifiers to open portals, still pulling things through, still destabilizing our timeline. Duncan Cameron went silent. He gave a few interviews in the 1990s, then stopped. He refused to speak publicly anymore. Those who knew him said he was haunted by what he had done, by what he had unleashed. He reportedly suffered from nightmares, flashbacks, periods where he would lose time himself, hours vanishing while he sat motionless, staring at nothing. In his last known interview, he said something chilling. The beast is still there. It did not die. It went through the portal, and portals go both ways. What did he mean? That the creature he manifested in 1983 is still alive somewhere in space-time? That it could come back? Or that the portal, though officially closed, is still open somewhere, on some level, allowing things to cross in both directions? We do not know, and we cannot ask him. Duncan Cameron, if he is still alive, is unreachable. The Montauk Project, real or fabricated, represents a specific type of existential terror. It is not the terror of natural disaster. It is not the terror of alien invasion. It is the terror of human arrogance. The terror that we, in our pursuit of knowledge and power, opened a door that should have remained closed. And now we cannot close it. We can only live with the consequences. If the Montauk whistleblowers are telling the truth, then the government knows reality is unstable. They know because they are the ones who destabilized it. And their silence is not ignorance. It is guilt. It is cover-up. They cannot admit what they did without admitting that they broke the world. So they deny. They ridicule. They classify. And they hope the cracks do not widen. But the cracks are widening. The glitches are increasing. And those of us paying attention are starting to connect the dots. The Mandela effect exploded in frequency after 2008, after CERN began operations, but it existed before that. Reports of shared false memories date back to the 1990s, and if you trace them further, you find clusters in the 1980s, right around 1983, right around the time Montauk allegedly shut down. What if CERN is not creating the glitches? What if CERN is revealing them? What if the damage was done decades ago and the collider, by generating extreme energies, is simply making the cracks visible? Like shining a light in a dark room and seeing the cobwebs you did not know were there. The cobwebs were always there. You just did not have the light to see them. Or worse, What if the Montauk shutdown in 1983 did not end the experiments? What if it simply forced them deeper underground? What if the portals are still being opened, but now with more care, more control, more secrecy? What if every glitch we experience is not an accident, but a test? What if someone, somewhere, is still sitting in a chair, visualizing targets, tearing holes in space-time, and we are living with the side effects? This is why the Montauk Project is terrifying. Not because of what happened, but because of what might still be happening. Not because the technology existed, but because it might still exist. Not because reality was fractured, but because the fracture might be deliberate. We are not victims of a past mistake. We might be subjects in an ongoing experiment, and we have no way to know, no way to prove it, no way to stop it. But the most accessible evidence of glitches is not buried in classified files or historical records. It is on the internet, filmed, uploaded, shared, and impossible to explain. We are living in the age of the camera. Nearly everyone carries a device that can record video. Dash cams in cars, security cameras on buildings, phones in pockets. We are documenting reality constantly, and occasionally, that documentation captures something that should not be possible. These are the simulation glitches caught on camera. There are thousands of videos online showing the same phenomenon. A person walking down the street suddenly freezes, mid-step, completely still, for several seconds. Then they resume as if nothing happened. Cars driving on highways freeze in place, not slowing down, not braking, just stopped, suspended in mid-motion. Then they continue. Skeptics say these are edited videos, paused footage, simple tricks. But many of these videos come from live streams, security feeds, dash cams with continuous recording. There is no pause button. The timestamp keeps running. The audio continues. Everything else in the frame moves normally. Birds fly, trees sway, other people walk by. But one person or one car is locked in place. Then there are the looping glitches, crowds of people where one person repeats the same motion over and over. Walking 3 steps, returning to the start. Walking 3 steps again. Like a broken animation cycle. Other people in the crowd do not react. They walk around the glitching person as if it is normal. Or they don't see it at all. The loop continues for minutes, then stops, and the person walks away. There are videos of objects disappearing. A bird in flight vanishing mid-air. Not flying out of frame, vanishing. One frame it is there, the next frame it is gone. No blur, no motion, just deletion. Cars driving down roads and blinking out of existence. People walking and stepping into an invisible threshold and ceasing to be. The technical analysis on these videos is inconclusive. Some are clearly fakes. You can see the edit points if you look closely. But others pass every test. No cuts, no digital artifacts, no signs of manipulation. The metadata is clean. The source is verified. And yet, the footage shows something impossible. One explanation is mass hallucination. Maybe the person recording saw something their brain could not process, and they interpreted it as a glitch. But the camera does not hallucinate. The camera records light. If the light says a person froze, then either the camera malfunctioned or the person froze. And when hundreds of cameras from different manufacturers, different locations, different years, are all recording the same type of event, the odds of synchronized malfunction drop to near zero. Another explanation is perception hacking. Maybe there is technology that can make people appear to freeze by manipulating the observer's sense of time. But that does not explain why the camera sees it too. Cameras do not have perception. They capture reality frame by frame. If the footage shows a freeze, then the freeze happened in physical space, not just in the mind of the observer. The most disturbing explanation is that these are real glitches. The simulation, the construct, whatever is running reality, occasionally lags. A rendering error, a frame drops, an object fails to load. and for a few seconds, the mask slips. We see the code. The person is not actually frozen. They are waiting for the next instruction, the next set of coordinates. The system is buffering, and then it catches up, and they move again. If this is true, then we are living in a rendered environment. Not metaphorically, literally. The world around you is being generated in real time, and it is not perfect, it glitches, and the cameras are catching it because cameras do not have the same filters human perception does. We are trained to ignore inconsistencies. Our brains smooth over gaps, but cameras record the raw feed. And the raw feed is showing us that reality is not continuous. It stutters. This brings us to the core question we have been circling this entire time. If all of these glitches are real, if memory can be rewritten, if people can vanish, if objects can appear from nowhere, if signals can come from nowhere, if history can be edited, if technology exists to manipulate time, and if cameras are catching the simulation failing, then what does that mean? It means the ground beneath your feet is not solid. It is code. And code has bugs. It means the past is not fixed. It can be overwritten. It means the present is not stable. It can glitch. It means the future is not inevitable. It might be scripted, or it might be random, but either way, you are not in control. This is the terror of the reality glitch. Not that monsters exist, but that existence itself is unreliable. Not that the world will end, but that the world is not actually the world. It is a construct, and constructs can fail. So how do you live with this? How do you go to work, pay bills, make plans, love people, when you know that reality can hiccup at any moment? When you know that your memories might be fake, that your past might be edited, that the people around you might phase out, that the timeline itself might shift, and you would never know? The answer, strangely, is the same as it has always been. You keep going, because what else is there? If reality is a simulation and it glitches, you cannot exit the simulation. You are part of it. If timelines are shifting and merging, you cannot step outside the timeline. You are inside it. If the past is being edited, you cannot preserve the original. You only have now. The glitches, as terrifying as they are, give us something valuable. Proof that reality is not fixed. If reality were truly solid, truly unchangeable, we would be trapped. Every mistake would be permanent. Every tragedy would be final. But if reality glitches, if timelines shift, if history can be edited, then nothing is final. The Mandela effect is disturbing because it suggests the past is fluid, but fluidity means possibility. It means that the worst moments of history might not be locked in stone. It means that the future, which feels so heavy and determined, might also be editable. The man from Taured is terrifying because he appeared from a place that does not exist, but his appearance proves that other places do exist, somewhere, in some version of reality. The universe is bigger than we thought. We are not alone in one static timeline. We are surrounded by infinite variations, and occasionally they touch. The Valentich disappearance is horrifying because he vanished, but it also means he went somewhere. If he ceased to exist, there would be wreckage. If he died, there would be a body. But there is nothing, which means he was not destroyed. He was moved. And if he was moved, then there are other places to be moved to. Other skies, other worlds. The wow signal is frustrating because it never repeated, but it happened. For 72 seconds, something out there tried to reach us, and we heard it. That is connection. That is evidence that the universe is not dead. Someone, somewhere, is broadcasting. And maybe one day, we will learn how to answer. The Voynich manuscript is unreadable, but it exists. It is a message in a bottle from another reality. And the fact that it crossed over means the borders are porous. What we consider impossible might just be unfamiliar. What we call magic might just be science from a different rule set. The phantom time hypothesis is disturbing because it questions history, but questioning is the first step to understanding. If our timeline is wrong, then fixing it means getting closer to the truth. And truth, however uncomfortable, is better than a beautiful lie. The Montauk Project is terrifying because it suggests humans have already learned to manipulate time and reality. But if they learned, we can learn. Knowledge is not locked away forever. It spreads, it leaks, and if the technology exists, eventually, someone will use it to repair instead of destroy. The simulation glitches are the most visceral evidence that reality is not what it seems. But if we are in a simulation, that means there is a level above the simulation. There is something outside. And if there is something outside, then the limitations of this reality are not absolute. The walls can be breached, the code can be understood, the game can be hacked. None of this is comforting in the traditional sense, but it is liberating. The illusion of solid reality is a prison. It tells you that the world is what it is, that history is fixed, that the future is determined, that you are powerless. The glitches tell you something different. They tell you the world is unstable, history is editable, the future is undecided, and you, as an observer, as a participant, might have more influence than you think. Because here is the secret. If reality is a simulation, then observation matters. In quantum mechanics, the act of observing changes the outcome. In a simulated environment, the player's choices influence the code. You are not a passive witness. You are part of the system, and systems respond to input. The Mandela effect is a collective phenomenon, millions of people sharing the same false memory. What if that collective belief is not a glitch, but a signal? What if the simulation adjusts to consensus? If enough people remember Berenstein with an E, maybe the timeline shifts to accommodate. If enough people insist Mandela died in the 80s, maybe that timeline becomes real in retrospect. The crowd is not wrong. The crowd is rewriting. The man from Taured did not glitch into our world by accident. He crossed because there was a moment of instability, a crack, and cracks appear when systems are under stress. Maybe the collective anxiety of 1954, post-war, Cold War, nuclear fear, created a weak point, and he slipped through. If that is true, then our collective state of mind influences the stability of reality. Fear creates cracks. Certainty seals them. The villages that vanish, the planes that disappear, the signals that arrive and never repeat. These are not random. They are responses. Reality is interactive. It is not a static film we are watching. It is a live system. And live systems have feedback loops. We influence it. It influences us. The glitches are the moments where the loop becomes visible. So what do we do with this knowledge? We stop pretending the world is stable when it clearly is not. We stop trusting institutions that insist on silence when the evidence demands investigation. We start asking the dangerous questions, not because we will get answers, but because asking changes the system. Questions are input. Curiosity is a force. Doubt is a tool. If CERN is shifting timelines, we demand transparency. If the government is experimenting with time travel, we demand accountability. If the simulation is glitching, we demand to know who is running it. And if no one is running it, if it is a natural system, then we learn the rules and we learn to navigate. The scientists are silent because they are afraid. Afraid of panic, afraid of chaos, afraid of admitting they do not have control. But silence does not prevent glitches. It just prevents preparation. If reality can shift, we need to know. If timelines can merge, we need to understand how. If the past can be edited, we need to protect what matters. And what matters is not the facts. Facts are fluid. What matters is experience. The love you feel is real even if the memory of it is edited. The pain you survive is real even if the timeline shifts. The choices you make are real even if the outcome is rewritten. You are real. Not because you can prove it, but because you experience it. And experience is the only thing the glitches cannot take away. The Boltzmann brain paradox says you might be a random fluctuation, a brain that assembled by chance and will dissolve in a moment. But even if that is true, this moment exists. This thought is happening. This feeling is real. And that is enough. That is everything. We started this journey asking if reality is stable. The answer is no. Reality glitches. It shifts. It edits. It fails. But that does not mean existence is meaningless. It means existence is dynamic. It means you are not trapped. The cage has holes. The script has blank pages. The simulation has cheats. You are living in a world that is stranger than you were taught. A world where memory is unreliable, where space is porous, where time is negotiable, where objects can cross from other realities, where signals arrive from nowhere, where history might be fiction, where the government might be playing with forces it does not understand, and where the very fabric of the world flickers like a bad connection. But you are still here. You are still thinking. You are still asking. And that makes you dangerous. Not to the world, to the illusion. Because the illusion needs you to believe it is solid. It needs you to trust the ground. It needs you to accept the silence. And you are not accepting it anymore. So here is the final glitch. The one they do not talk about. The one that scares the system more than any of the others. You, awake, aware, questioning, looking at the cracks, noticing the pixels, seeing the pattern. Because once you see, you cannot unsee. And once you know the world glitches, you stop being a passive observer. You start being a variable, and variables change outcomes. The world is not what you think, but you are more than you know. The glitches are not proof that reality is broken. They are proof that reality is flexible. And flexible things can be shaped, so shape it, not with force, with attention, with intention. With the simple, stubborn insistence that you matter, that your experience is valid, that your memory, however edited, is yours. The scientists are silent because they do not know what to say. They are standing at the edge of the same cliff you are, looking down into the same abyss. They see the glitches too. They just will not admit it. But their silence is not your silence. You do not have to protect the illusion. You can say what you see. You can share what you know. You can ask the questions they will not ask. And maybe, just maybe, asking is the glitch the system cannot handle. Because the system was built on certainty, on trust, on the assumption that you will keep believing even when the evidence says otherwise. But you are done believing. You are done trusting. You are done pretending the ground is solid when you can feel it shifting under your feet. So stand here with me at the edge of the known world. Look out at the glitching horizon. Feel the instability. Embrace the uncertainty. And know that you are not alone. There are millions of us. We remember Berenstain. We know the Monopoly man had a monocle. We heard about Mandela dying in prison. We saw the videos. We read the reports. We know something is wrong. And we are not crazy. We are awake. And awake is exactly where we need to be. Because sleeping is safe. Sleeping is comfortable. Sleeping is what the system wants. But awake is powerful. Awake sees the glitches. And seeing is the first step to understanding. And understanding is the first step to control. The reality you were born into is not the reality you will die in. It is shifting, glitching, evolving, and you are part of that evolution. You are not a victim of the glitch. You are the glitch, the anomaly, the crack in the code, the question the system cannot answer, the observer who refuses to collapse the wave function. So keep watching, keep questioning, keep noticing, because every time you see a glitch, you are expanding the crack. Every time you share what you see, you are making the invisible visible. Every time you refuse to accept the official explanation, you are weakening the illusion. And one day, maybe soon, maybe not, the glitches will become so frequent, so obvious, so undeniable that the system will have to respond. The scientists will have to talk. The institutions will have to investigate. The silence will break. And when it does, the world will change, not into chaos, into clarity, because the truth, however strange, is always better than the lie. And the lie is that reality is solid. The truth is that reality is code, and code can be rewritten by us, for us, starting now. So go out there, live in the glitching world, love the people who might be from other timelines, make memories even if they might be edited, build things even if they might disappear, because the act of building, the act of loving, the act of living, that is real. That is the only thing that survives the glitches, not the form, the force, not the memory, the meaning. You are not a victim of a broken reality. You are a pioneer in a reality that is waking up. And waking up is messy, it is confusing, it is terrifying, but it is also necessary, because sleeping forever is death. And we are not dead, we are glitching, which means we are alive, which means we are changing, which means we have a chance. Take it.